Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live, the place where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. I'm your host, Andrew Rose Butler, and we are wrapping up our series this week on walking in purpose from becoming to freedom. And over the past 3 weeks, we've talked about purpose is not a destination, obedience over perfection, and staying grounded while we're growing. And last week, that's what we touched on about how do we stay connected to the vine and and that our roots go deep so that we can stay connected as we're growing. So we one don't burn out, and two that we don't lose hope when the seasons get tough. And that brings us to this week: is how do we find purpose in every season? Because every season is not great. It's not always going to be spring. It's not always going to be summer. It's not going to be fall. It's not going to be winter all the time. And so we go through the seasons of our life where things seem like it's going great. We're on the mountaintop. We're prospering. We're doing good on our job. Our kids are healthy. Our marriages are well. Our friendships are this. We're living life. And then there are other seasons when life shows up and we're like, what in the world happened? And we feel like sometimes that, I always quote this, and I love it from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Mr. Chumney says, in Narnia, that sometimes it's always winter and never summer. And sometimes we can feel that way. We can feel like our lives are, it's always winter. There's no summer, there's no spring, there's no growth. Everything just is just frozen. It's hard, it's difficult, and we're struggling in that season. But to know that God has a purpose for the season that you're in, and sometimes it can be hard for us to accept that our sense of purpose changes as we move through those different stages of life, as we're growing, as through the different seasons, as we're aging. All of these things, it changes, and sometimes purpose means creating or building something new. Sometimes we have to pivot. And sometimes the thing that we're pivoting to is actually our purpose, because maybe the life we thought that we were on, the journey that we thought we were on was the right one. And maybe it was, we were in places, and I've talked about this before, where sometimes we find ourselves in places because we needed to make a decision. Now, whether you're in a job that you don't like and you're in it and you can't understand why you're here, and you've been here 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you've been unhappy in this space, and you're like, I started this job because, bills need to be paid and they paid well. And so I took this job. Or maybe you are in a city, state, country, wherever, and you're here and you're like, this, I feel there's more. I feel like there needs to be a change or transition. But sometimes we allow fear to get us in that place. But God will do what He needs to do to move you to where you need to be. And He's like that eel, when and Mama Eagle's trying to get her eaglets to fly. She put thorns and stuff in the nest and forces them out in order for them to fly because they become too comfortable. And sometimes we get comfortable in our season that we're in. We can be like the disciples. Let's build a tabernacle here because, Lord, it's good for us to be here. And He was like, no, we're not staying here. There's work for you to do. The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, and I'm sending you out into the vineyard to do work. But sometimes we can get into this place where we become stuck. And then when transition happens, we feel like, maybe I failed, but maybe the season that you were in, you were stuck. And maybe you were stuck in winter, maybe you were stuck in summer or spring or whatever season you were in, and there was no transition, there was no growth. And God has been stirring you up and say, it's time for you to grow. It's time for you to move. Don't be stuck here. Sometimes we get stuck in grief and pain. We get stuck in trauma, and we're frozen in this space. And God is saying it's time for you to move. And so again, that transition happens because our purpose is time for us to move. And sometimes our transition, our season is about healing. Maybe there's a time in a space where you have just been so busy that you didn't want to deal with the things that have been going on in your life. And, we're just like, if I just keep moving. And sometimes, we keep busy because we don't want to grieve. We don't want to heal. And because we don't want to look at ourselves. We don't want to grow. Because we're like, people are going to look at me different if I am different. And I was listening to Pastor Brian Trenton this morning, and he was talking about, I think it's David's brother, Eliab, I believe his name was. And when David came to confront Goliath and he came down, his brother said to him, "Why are you here? Why don't you go back and tend the sheep? That's where you belong. You belong in tending sheep, not fighting giants. You're not equipped. You're little. You don't have the skills. You don't go back to where you belong." But God had transitioned him out for him to become in this place where he had already learned some things, but he needed to grow. But sometimes people were keeping him stuck. His brother was like, "Go back and do what you're supposed to be doing, which is tending sheep and not coming to the stage," because he couldn't recognize where God was calling him to. And if we listen to those people, we can become stuck in seasons because we listen to the voice of others versus listen to the voice of God that tells us it's time to move, it's time to transition, it's time to heal. And sometimes we don't face it because somebody says, "Oh, you should be over it by now." And so we don't fully heal from the trauma of our lives. We don't fully heal from our past because we think we should be over it, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so we could be that God is leading you into a season of healing. Sometimes it's about resting. How many times do we, my friends, I'm in this ministerial group of women in ministry group, and this is posted on Saturday, this past Saturday, and she goes, "Now I want to speak rest basically into your lives and say, take this time and say, I'm going to rest today, and pull away." And we need those seasons of rest. As women in particular, we think that we have to keep moving. And as I was going through this season, I was working with my AI, and I said, in this season, Wonder Woman is on vacation. And came back and said, that is such a good thing, because for a lot of us, we put the cape on, and I talked about this last week as well. We put the cape on, and we've got the lasso, and we just work until we are exhausted, and we feel like we still need to push ourselves and keep pushing until we collapse. And that's not what God has for us. That's not what He rested. And so we should rest as well. And so sometimes God is calling us into a season of rest where it's like, pull away from stuff. You don't have to be in church every time the door is open. You don't have to, feel like you've got to keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. You don't take vacation days at work. You're sick, you go to work. And I'm speaking for myself because that was me. I was like, if I can get up, I'm working. I'm going to work. If I call, and this is my job is doing this, that if I call out and say I am sick, it means I cannot physically get up to move and do anything. I am literally, let's go to the emergency room sick. Because if I keep moving and I don't have a fever, I'm going to work. Do whatever I have to do. And so I had to learn that sometimes the body is tired, your brain is tired, especially if you work in a stressful job, and you got young kids and you got all kind of stuff. You're caretaking, you're all these things. God is calling. I think it's in Hebrews where He talks about there is a time of rest for God's people, and we need to accept that. We need to accept that rest and take our rest. I wrote this little booklet a couple years ago, calling finding me time in our busy day. Give me a break. I mean, sometimes we need to give ourselves a break, and we need to find ways to rest. And so, there are just times when we maybe just be getting through the day, and that's our season where we're just putting one foot out in front of the other. But no matter what season you're in, it still matters. And Ecclesiastes 3:1 says there is a season, a time and a season for everything under heaven. And so whether it's, it's a time to rest, a time to heal, and that's not what it says, but that's what I'm saying. It's a time to rest, a time to heal, a time to pull back, a time for us to listen and to be able to start moving and transitioning as God is moving us into our different seasons. And we have to know what those seasons are. And so a lot of us find it hard when we compare our seasons to the lives of others. So, but the purpose doesn't look the same for everyone. Like I said, you could be in a season of resting, and I could be in a season of working. And just because I feel like I should be resting because you're resting, but I don't know what God has called you to. And so therefore I can't compare where I am to where you are, because we're not in this, we're running a race, but we're running our individual race, and we have to be aware of that as well. So it doesn't mean that you're falling behind. Our seasons change. There's purpose in one season. It's going to look different from the other season. And so God is present and working in every season of your life. So whether you're growing, whether you're waiting, whether you're in transition, whether you're rebuilding, whether you are resting, whether you are healing, God is there. And nothing that we experience in any of those seasons is wasted. God is going to use all of it for his glory and for our good. And we have to recognize that God is using it all. There is purpose behind every season of life that we're in, that he wants to use it. He wants to strengthen you in those waiting seasons. It's because you're resting. It's like running a marathon. I shared before, I've done the Monument 10K a couple of times while I lived in Virginia, and I'm still trying to keep up with that. Like once I have the surgery, and I'm not sure if I shared it last week or not. So my surgery is finally scheduled for July the 10th. So y'all keep me in prayer. And so, I was just like, ooh, once I get all of this thing and this nerve is decompressed and spine is back together, I was like, I wonder if I can be able to walk again, do another, another 5K, 10K, not this year. It probably be 2027, 2028, late 2027. But it's a journey. And so again, I have to recognize that too, that I'm in transition. And I'm in a season of healing where God is like, okay, you've done your thing. Now it's time for you to get your body back. And let's move on and let's do this. And so we're going to keep doing, we're going to keep moving and recognize that God is working in every season of it. So what keeps us hindered from sometimes understanding and recognizing and even celebrate the season that we're in? Again, comparing our progress to somebody else. There are other people my age that are running marathons and doing all this other kind of stuff, and they don't have this health challenge. And then there are others who are in worse condition than I'm in. And so I can't compare myself to say, okay, well, they're this age and they can do this and I can't do this. And then there's somebody looking at me saying, I wish I could walk. I wish I could talk. I wish I could use my hands. And so we can't compare where we are with somebody else. We each have our individual race to run, and we can't compare ourselves. Feeling frustrated when things move slowly. Ooh, that was something I had to deal with when I came here. Now, as y'all know, I'm in Virginia, and when I came here in May, was with the understanding that this was what was going to happen. When I talked to the VA, this is what they said they were going to do. This is what we said was going to happen. And then I got here, and then that didn't happen. And then it was like delay after delay after delay. And I was like, okay. And don't get frustrated. God is working it out. He's got a plan. I know what I had planned, and I know how I wanted things worked out, because I had things that I wanted to be done, and I wanted to be back in Mexico by this time, and all of, I was like, that's your plan. That's not my plan. I have things that I want to do, and there's a reason why you're here. And so when we can look and see and celebrate sometimes when things move slow, when things don't go the way we have them planned out. We're going to talk about that next month. We're going to talk about, resilience when we have setbacks. How do we come back from all of that? But we're not there yet. That's for next month. And so sometimes we worry that we're falling behind, that we're finding it hard to accept change. And change is hard. Change is hard for a lot of people. And they don't like when situations don't go the way they wanted to go, or um, there has been changes, in, whether it's at work, at home, in our lives, in our bodies, whatever the situation is, and we get into that new season. There's some people who don't have a hard time with the seasons changing in nature, and so they struggle when life changes. And so, how do we get our minds wrapped around the fact that we are evolving, we are changing, we are growing, we're developing, we're aging. We need to heal, we need to rest. All of these things are all a part of God's plan. And so what can we do so we can, one, appreciate where we are right now, appreciate the season that you're in. I'm learning to appreciate. Yes, I may not be able to walk well, but you know what? I thank God that I can still move. I can still walk. I can, not the greatest, but I'm still walking. I'm still standing. And so I can appreciate that. And so we can appreciate the season that we're in right now. Maybe you're not where you want to be, but you are somewhere and you're not where you were yesterday. So celebrate and appreciate that. Have faith that things will happen at the right time. Mm, Sometimes that's hard. We were like, God, we have timelines. And we got 5-year plans and 10-year plans and all this other things that we've mapped out of where we think we should be by 35 and 45 and whatever age. And we have things mapped out, and God says, okay, I'm glad you wrote that down. And it's good that you have that written down. But here's my plan that I have for you. And it sometimes it does looks nothing like what we envision for ourselves, and we can fall back into that place again of frustration. But that we got to figure out that God is in charge of the time. He says that He's written all of our days down in His book, and He is well acquainted with what He has planned out for us. And He said it was good. Even though we look at it and we say, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't look good. I thought I'd be married by now, I have kids by now, I'm graduated from college by now, and do all this other stuff. I'm on this almost, Medicare age, and I just graduated from college. So let that sink in. And so, and I thought I was going to be, school was going to be this, and all these times I tried and didn't happen, but God had to plan a season and a timing for when He wanted things done. And I celebrate the fact that He's doing so. And then focus on the progress that you've made instead of comparing yourself to others. Again, we are in different seasons of our lives. Sometimes we're in the beginning of spring, sometimes we're at the end, we're going into summer, sometimes we're heading into winter, whatever those things are. Enjoy the journey, take pictures and enjoy it, and bask in the memory of how you're growing in this season and the progress that you have made, because you weren't, again, where you were yesterday, last year, last month. You are not the same. You're growing, you're changing, and trying to stay in the moment rather than about worrying about the next. Enjoy the season. Pastor says this is the moment. This is what we have right now, the present. And so we celebrate and we rest in the present moment and not worry about, what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we know what's happening right this moment. Celebrate, rejoice in it, and trust God, and that He is working it out. Again, He knows the plan He has for you. So stay connected to Him. So that's why we got to stay grounded as we're growing, as we're transitioning, as we're in our season, when we're connected and our roots go deep, just like that tree. The tree goes through its different seasons. And in wintertime, the tree doesn't worry about the fact that it's losing all its leaves, because a tree knows that it's still being nourished, and he knows that spring is coming. And so the tree doesn't worry, and we shouldn't either, as we are like that tree planted by the rivers of water, and our roots go down deep. We don't worry about the seasons as they change, because we're anchored. And so whatever season we are in, we can stand firm, we can stand rooted, and we can provide some measure of inspiration and encouragement to somebody else. in whatever season that you are in. And so as we are wrapping up this week, um, we can't go out without a challenge and without work for you to do in the coming days. And so what season of life are you in right now? Are you in a season of spring? Are you, where things are going well? There's growth. You can see the growth. You can see, things are just flourishing in your life, and there's happiness and there's joy and all this other stuff. And maybe you're in summer where it's a little hot and you're a bit uncomfortable, but it's still warm and you can enjoy that. And maybe you're in the fall season, you're transitioning, things are it's still looking good, like we can appreciate the fall colors and the season's a little bit cooler, but it's still good, but we recognize that transition is coming. There's change. The leaves are starting to fall off more. And then maybe you're in winter where, you can't find beauty because all your leaves are gone and you're like, it looks barren, but there are still beautiful things even in winter when it's cold and the snow is there. For those of us who live in the winter climates, that there is still beauty to be found even in those. And so where are you right now? What is your current season? And can you be grateful for where you are, and what lessons are you learning during this season, during this time? What are you learning? What is God teaching you? Is it to be grateful, to be thankful, to be at peace, to rest, to trust Him more? What is God teaching you in this current season? And how can you stay committed to where you are at this moment, to look at this moment, to enjoy it, the moment, the season that you're in, the time that you're in, like to sit in it and said, okay, God, how can I celebrate you and celebrate the progress that I've made even in this season? Because maybe you were in a winter season and before and you didn't handle it well. And and now you're coming through it, and you can find joy in it. Look for the joy even in the winter season that you're in. Where can you find that kernel of joy? Where can you see rainbows in the midst of even the darkest times in your life? There's a measure of joy. There is hope even in that season of your life, and to look for it. And I challenge you to speak, practice gratitude in your current season. Be grateful for where you are right now, even if things aren't going exactly the way you thought they would be. We're going to practice gratitude. And if you need help, I wrote a book last year called Thanksgiving, Not Just a Holiday, you know, transforming your day with gratitude. And so, how do we transform our day? How do we find those moments, those times to be grateful and to be thankful for everything that we're going through? Whether even if it's in sickness, when I wake up in the morning and there is pain, I 24 hours, 24/7, 365 right now of pain. And I was like, God, help me to find joy even in the midst of pain. And sometimes I say to myself, my kids used to say, you coaching yourself through this pain? I am. I am. I am talking to myself. I'm talking to God in this moment when the pain hits and it's real, real bad. I have to coach myself through pain, and I'm like, God, you are good. Thank you. I can still feel, because somebody can't feel right now. Somebody doesn't have a leg right now. So Lord, thank you. It hurts and tears is flowing. But God, I thank you because I can still feel that I'm still alive. I can experience this. I don't like it, and I want it to stop. However, God, I thank you that you've trusted me with this season. You and I didn't want you to trust me with this. I want you to trust me with something else. But he's been carrying me, and so I've been trusting him with that, and so learning, how to find gratitude and joy even in the midst of pain, even in the midst of suffering. We have the saying in Jamaica that sometimes if to take bad things, I make joke. And so you have to be able to laugh even in the times when the season um, are not so good. Find humor. I'm not saying deny where you are. I'm not denying. The doctors are like, yeah, we need to operate like soon. And so So that it's a reality, and you may be in a reality space right now, whether you've lost a loved one or whatever is happening in your life, where your reality is pain, your reality is grief, your reality is dealing with loss, your reality is I don't know where my next meal is coming from. That could be your reality right now. But know that God has a plan. God is working it out. God will provide for you. God will take care of you. And if you start to thank Him for His provision, for His protection, for His healing, for whatever it is, He is moving in the midst of you right now. And so I'm celebrating with you that God is going to do, God is carrying you, and He will continue to carry you, even through the difficult winter seasons of your life. And I'm hanging in there for you. I'm standing in the gap for you to know that God is with you and He's carrying you. He's keeping you in this season of your life, and that I'm grateful for you and for the life that you are living right now, and that God's got you. And we trust Him with everything at this moment. And so we know that purpose can still be found during times of change. And so, in fact, change is often when our sense of purpose becomes the greatest. And so we're going to continue to trust Him. And as we lead on to next month, we're going to talk about resilience, how to come back from a setback. And so, we know that there is a comeback for us. There is a comeback for us. There is joy in the morning. Well, weeping may endure for the night, but joy is coming until we can come back from whatever life, is throwing at us. And so the next few weeks will be, next week will probably be alive, but the remaining of July will more than likely be recorded and be pre-recorded because, um, again, I'm having surgery and being able to sit up for 30 minutes. I don't know what it's going to look like. So we will have, they will be pre-recorded lives. And so, but I want to thank you all for those of you who have been praying for me, especially over the past few months, as I have gone through the worst part of this um, disorder. God has been faithful, and I appreciate you all for being here with me, for supporting me in prayer, for the well wishes. I thank you, and continue to pray for me in this journey that we are on together, as we're empowered to live. And so I want to again thank you all for joining me for this episode of Empowered to Live, where women are empowered to live, encouraged to heal, and inspired to become. So until next time, stay empowered, and I will see you all next week. Have a great night.